episode 2, and today we're chatting the difference between whitening and bleaching. So, are you providing a teeth whitening service or a tooth bleaching service? Let's find out. Let's take a moment to thank our sponsor before we dive into this week's episode. Our sponsor is Fern Whitening Supplies. If you're not aware, Fern is dental professional crafted and created. It has everything you need to provide the best chairside whitening service, as well as a unique Elevate line, which is going to elevate your chairside experience or your retail space. No branding on the labels. Make this product your own and thrive with your teeth whitening services. The marketing term is definitely whitening. If you're chatting chairside whitening, that is definitely the term that gets used more over than bleaching, and it's not actually correct if we think about what it actually means with the actual word whitening. So let's dive in. Teeth whitening. So the definition of whitening is removing abrasive agents off of the extrinsic tooth surface, and that is done with force or with abrasives. Bleaching products are neither of those things. So how do you whiten a tooth? This would be something, say if you're chairside at a dental office, like a gritty pumice. This is going to remove that surface extrinsic stain. If you're outside of a dental office, you're looking at abrasive paste. Think charcoal toothpaste, Fern's toothpaste, as well as, of course, there are lots of home remedies like baking soda, etc. And these are abrasive agents, so there are lots of reasons why the dental community does preach not to use this as an everyday occurrence, because obviously that is going to be harmful to your soft tissue over time. Now, what is force? So that would be, think of like a manual toothbrush, a prophy angle, and brushing properly is force. So the abrasive agents and the force together can whiten the tooth structure. Once you remove that extrinsic stain, obviously the tooth structure underneath is going to look brighter. Bleaching is when you actually start to modify and change that tooth structure color intrinsically as well as extrinsically. Back up. Intrinsic is the tooth structure that you physically can not touch on the tooth. It's the inner layers. And then our extrinsic is our outside layer. So that layer that actually does get the food and drink consumption contact. Now, to whiten intrinsically is to actually remove those stain particles that are locked and loaded in your tubulars. If you are not familiar with this breakdown, take a training that is going to go in depth, or if you're a dental professional, you should already know this. But as we know, we have different layers to our tooth structure, and the two layers that we're focusing on the most when it comes to bleaching is the inner layers that connect the enamel and the dentin. So in those little layers, we have our tubulars, and our tubulars are what absorb that stain pigment, and it's locked in there. So what happens is when we place on our bleaching products, most likely they're peroxides, they're going to sit on the extrinsic layer, so they're going to help to remove that extrinsic stain. But then the main purpose of a chairside appointment is to absorb into that next layer. So we want to go into those tubulars and oxidize, break down those stain pigments. That's where you're going to see the biggest change in color. Interesting part about chairside whitening that a lot of technicians are unaware of. If we think about the chemical breakdown of peroxides, regardless if you're working with a hydrogen or a carbamide, both of them do need different breakdown times outside of the chair time. What that means is really your goal chairside should be to absorb the gel into those tubulars and then it continue to break down for the extended amount of time that peroxide needs. This means that if you are completing bleaching effectively, your client should be brighter in 24 hours, not falling back. So let's take a little side note here and chat about chairside false whiteness. What happens is there's so many different companies that get you to purchase higher percentages of peroxides. So what's going to happen here? It's going to absorb quicker into that tubular structure. It's going to cause sensitivity shocks because you're absorbing quite quickly. And depending on the client and their tooth structure, they could potentially absorb quicker than others and then in return cause some sensitivity. Now, what happens is from there, then they're asking you to keep that gel on for more extended periods of time than what's really needed. So think back to what we just learned. Ideally, peroxides are breaking down outside of chair time. So what's the point of putting more peroxide on chairside? The only reason technician is doing this is to get the tooth more dehydrated so it's thirsty and it's going to look whiter. So the more contact time you keep giving your tooth with your different rounds of peroxide is the more dehydrated the tooth is going to become. So let's say you're doing 4 rounds of peroxide, 15, 20 minutes. Side note, that is the literal longest time peroxide's active in the air. If you're leaving that on for more than that, wasting product, wasting time. Now, if I were to put on 4 rounds of a peroxide, I am literally just dehydrating the tooth. What else am I doing that for? Because I know that I need that absorption time regardless. It's anywhere from 3 to 6 plus hours that peroxide is going to oxidize and break down. So why am I wasting product in the chair? This is going to give me a higher cost per client, potentially more sensitivity, and a much higher chance of the client being super happy chairside, but then later on when they rehydrate, you're going to get that text or that call or that email saying, why are my teeth not as white as what they were when I left? Chiclet white is not real, okay? Never base either products or a service tech off of before and after photos. Rant over. So whitening is when we're removing surface stain. Bleaching is when we're absorbing and removing that stain pigment. Now, some of you are probably flagging like, Rachel, you can't remove intrinsic stain. You can't remove some intrinsic stain. Again, do your research on that, but there are some intrinsic stains, mostly caused by medications, maybe trauma, that yes, you cannot whiten that tooth, bleach that tooth. See, whitening is just such a marketing word now that even though that's not the process, you still just use the word. So whitening and bleaching, great separate. Guess what? It's even better together. If you are not doing both of these in your sessions, you are not giving your clients as great of a session as they could have. Now, when it comes to the differences between bleaching products, hydrogen and carbamide, hydrogen is 3 times stronger than carbamide. I love this example because there's a brand in the dental world that is a 44% carbamide, and it gets seen as a really strong gel, and it's not, okay? It's only equivalent to just around a 15% hydrogen peroxide. That's a beauty professional strength, and it can be used without a barrier. So your 44% CP is not as strong as you are thinking. Now, I'm not saying the strongest gel out there is going to give you the best results, not by any means, but a 44% carbamide, you 100% could be giving your client a better result, moving up that strength. So not huge by any means, but still you could be adjusting that a bit. And if you need more information on the difference between hydrogen and carbamide, do your research. Another question that comes up when we chat whitening and bleaching is, well, how do I know if a client is going to get good absorption or not and good results? That ideally is going to be taught to you, but then also it's going to take time. The more clients you see, the more you're going to be able to recognize different abnormalities, etc. But there are a lot of things that could potentially cause a result to not go the way you're hoping for. A couple big flags though to watch for: if a client has a more gray hue of a tooth, that's much harder to whiten, as well as if a client's a really big clencher or grinder, we've probably got quite a bit of erosion going on that again is going to be harder to whiten. Bleach both, and the biggest one is going to be if your client has heavy tartar buildup. So really important to make sure that you're seeing how long it's been since they've had their last cleaning, because it's not worth anyone's time or money to just bleach tartar. Not at all. What happens if you get a client that you honestly are not sure? All of your consent forms should be very apparent that all results vary. You can never guarantee a result, okay? You are not a dentist, and even dentists can't even guarantee results. Teeth sometimes just have a mind of their own. You could do everything right, you could screen properly, the client can seem like the ideal client, and you can still just not get good results. So that's huge. Never be looking for perfect results every single client, and never tell a client that they are going to get a chiclet white smile. You should always be under promising and over delivering. That is the biggest recommendation I have for you, is never promise anything to a client, because unfortunately it doesn't always happen. Now, if a client is very unhappy with their results, you're going to have to ask yourself if they were an ideal client to begin with. Did they fall into any of those medical or dental histories that you should be flagging for? And or were they really bright to begin with? If a client is chiclet white to already start, where else are they going to go? There's no more movement there. So that's huge. And that is really important to remember, is that if a client is super white, they're not going to get much movement. So that is the difference between whitening and bleaching. Use whichever word you prefer when it comes to marketing. Of course, whitening is out there, but that is the difference. So do both in your sessions. That is the best results for sure. Believe me, I have tried a lot of different techniques, and at the end of the day, that's where I've found the clients have enjoyed the service the most. They feel like they're getting more bang for their buck, and it does really help with the results. That's my wrap for this week. Thanks so much for listening to another episode of Whitening Wednesday, and can't wait to see you again next week.